everyone, and happy April. April is a big month for me. Of course, it is my birthday month, and it is also Sexual Assault Awareness Month. That is a cause that is very near and dear to me. It is a cause that I hold from a personal perspective, being that I am a survivor of sexual assault. So, what better presentation than to talk about destigmatizing sexual assault and preventing sexual assault? So, stick with me. And just a disclaimer, this is, of course, a sensitive topic. So, if you find that you are becoming overwhelmed by listening to this discussion, do whatever you need to do to take care of yourself, whether it be stopping the presentation altogether, stepping away, taking a breather, but do whatever you need to do to take care of yourself. And here's a quote by the late, great Maya Angelou. It says, "I can be changed by what happens to me, but I refuse to be reduced by it." And this is a quote that I resonate with, especially being a survivor of sexual assault. Yes, that unfortunate event changed me, but I refused to let it reduce me. I refused to let it hold me back. And when I came to the realization that, yes, although I have been changed by that event, but I will not let it stop me from making the progress that I need to, that's when I truly became a survivor. Let's talk about it. What is sexual assault? According to the U.S. Department of Justice's website, the term sexual assault means any non-consensual sexual act prescribed by federal, tribal, or state law, including when the victim lacks capacity to consent. And according to RAINN, or the Rape, Abuse, and Incest National Network, this includes attempted rape, fondling or unwanted sexual touching, forcing a victim to perform sexual acts, and that includes orally or penetrating the perpetrator's body. Rape is penetration of the victim's body, penetration of sexual organs with any body part or object, or oral penetration of a sexual organ without the person's consent. And I want to emphasize that rape is not the fault of the victim. And you'll probably hear me say this a lot during this presentation. Well, I figured I'd share my personal story. At 17 years old, I found myself in an awful position. I was raped by a 37-year-old teacher outside of my family home. This was the biggest violation of my life. That night, he stole my innocence. My happiness died. My creativity died. My motivation died. My excitement for life and desire to live died. He went on with his life, business as usual, and my life was changed forever. I blamed myself. How could I have been so stupid? Why didn't I see this coming? Why did I trust this individual? Why me? Emotionally, I became withdrawn. I was angry that this was my new reality. Being a victim of rape was a part of my story. In the long run, I can say that this has impacted my ability to maintain connections with people. This violation made me more aware of others. If there's a behavior exhibited that I didn't like, I shut down and I easily cut people off. Happiness was hard to find again. As I became older and more educated, I learned that it was not my fault. It was 100% totally his fault. He chose to groom me. He chose to rape me. And when I finally accepted these facts, that's when I truly became a survivor. The journey of healing is definitely one for a lifetime. So let's talk statistics. Every 68 seconds, an American is sexually assaulted. On average, there are 463,634 victims of rape and sexual assault each year in the United States. And with that statistic, we're looking at a population including ages 12 years and older. Let's look at race. A nationally representative survey indicates that while almost 18% of white women and 7% of Asian Pacific Islander women will be raped in their lifetimes, almost 19% of black women, 24% of mixed race women, and 34% of American Indian and Alaska Native women will be raped during their lifetimes. Let's look at age. Ages 12 to 34, the youth and young adult population are at the highest risk of being victims of sexual assault. They take up about 54% of the victims. Those age 65 and older are 92% less likely than 12 to 24-year age population to be a victim of rape or sexual assault, and 83% less likely than those aged 25 to 49 years old. If we look at gender, we will see that 1 out of 6 American women has been the victim of an attempted rape or completed rape in her lifetime. Girls ages 16 to 19 are 4 times more likely compared to the general public to be victims of attempted rape or completed rape. When we look at males, about 1 in 33 American men have experienced an attempted or completed rape in their lifetime. 1 out of every 10 rape victims are males. And if we look at male college students, which ages about 18 to 24, they're 5 times more likely to be a victim of rape or sexual assault than non-students. In looking at transgender, genderqueer, non-conforming college students, 21% of that population have been sexually assaulted compared to 18% of non-TGQN females and 4% of non-TGQN males. So one of the best ways to end stigma associated with sexual assault is to talk about sexual assault. These assaults are happening, so why aren't we comfortable talking about it? If we talk about it, we can ultimately prevent it, right? So some personal conscious changes that could be made are to change language and stop blaming the victims. When it comes to changing the language, I even think about, even in this presentation, a lot of the times I'm using the word sexual assault. Of course, it's Sexual Assault Awareness Month. But when I am describing my own personal experience, I use the word rape because it was a rape. I prefer not to soften what happened to me by using the term sexual assault. I prefer not to make the listener comfortable by using the word sexual assault. I will use rape because rape is what happened to me. There are also instances where, people feel the need to label, the type of rape that occurred, date rape, acquaintance rape. But in reality, it doesn't matter if the person was on a date. It doesn't matter how well they knew the person. What matters is the person experienced a rape. Because we don't use the term rape, or because we don't talk about rape directly, does not mean that those rapes aren't happening. That's why it's important that we call it what it is, that we have these conversations so that we can begin moving towards true prevention efforts and, of course, destigmatizing the term rape. So those victims out there will be comfortable talking about it among their families, talking about it to law enforcement, having those conversations with the people who need to hear the conversations. And another thing we want to remember is to stop blaming the victim. It is not the victim's fault. It does not matter what the victim was wearing. It does not matter what the context of the conversations were. It does not matter if the victim was, the victim was not dressed and was in front of the perpetrator. If the victim said no, the victim said no. I remember being asked, did you try to fight back? It doesn't matter. I shouldn't have to answer that. Did I not fight hard enough? Of course I tried to stop what happened to me. But that doesn't matter. What it does is make the victim less likely to talk about it with someone else. What it does is put the victim in mental anguish, feeling guilty, feeling embarrassment. Meanwhile, the perpetrator is living life business as usual. Let's stop focusing on what the victim did and let's focus on what the perpetrator chose to do. So when looking at preventing rape, we want to address protective and risk factors. We want to be able to recognize some of those factors that may put a person at risk of becoming a perpetrator or perpetrating these types of crimes. There are risk factors linked to a greater likelihood of sexual violence perpetration. They are contributing factors, but might not be direct causes. And remember, not everyone who is identified as a risk becomes a perpetrator of sexual violence or rape. But let's just talk about some of those risk factors. And I found these on the CDC website if you want to look at them yourself. Some individual factors include substance use, delinquency, lack of concern for others, exhibiting aggressive behaviors and acceptance of violent behaviors, early sexual initiation, coercive sexual fantasies particularly, preference for impersonal sex and sexual risk-taking, exposure to sexually explicit media, especially early on, hostility towards women, adherence to traditional gender role norms, hypermasculinity, suicidal behavior, and prior sexual victimization or perpetration. And there are also some relationship factors that may contribute to perpetration. That includes a family history of conflict and violence, childhood history of physical, sexual, or emotional abuse, emotionally unsupportive family and emotionally unsupportive family environment, having a poor parent-child relationship, particularly with fathers, association with sexually aggressive, hypermasculine, and delinquent peers, and involvement in a violent or abusive intimate relationship. Some additional risk factors, community related, are poverty, lack of employment opportunities, lack of institutional support from police and the judicial system, general tolerance of sexual violence within the community, and weak community sanctions against sexual violence perpetrators. And we like to be able to identify some protective factors, some factors that may lessen the likelihood of someone becoming a sexual violence victim or a perpetrator of such violence. And that includes having families where the caregivers work through conflicts peacefully, emotional health, and the feeling of connectedness. Having that academic achievement and showing empathy and concern for how others may feel and how one's actions may affect the feelings of another. We also want to begin to, rethink those social norms. I've seen more recently, there are cases of, let's say, teachers, women teachers who have sexually assaulted or raped a child, a male student, for example. And, I would often see in the comment sections men, encouraging it or saying, oh, I wish that was me. I wish that was my teacher when I was a student. But that, would you sing that same song if it were a male teacher perpetrating sexual violence, sexual assault, or rape on a female child? It would be a totally different story, right? But some other societal factors that we want to address and rethink, want to change again those societal norms that support sexual violence. Want to change those societal norms that support male superiority and sexual entitlement. We want to change social norms that maintain women's inferiority and sexual submissiveness. We want to change and address those weak laws and policies related to sexual violence and gender equity. And again, and also want to make sure high levels of crime and other forms of violence are addressed appropriately. Another thing that we can do to address rape and prevent rape is to educate. Again, having those conversations, looking at all of the resources online, just seeing what are, recognizing what are some of the statistics, what are some things that we need to change, looking at policy, just educating yourself, even down to knowing the true definition of what rape is, what is considered rape, what is considered molestation, under what category do these fall. Just educating yourself and being informed on what's going on in society as it relates to rape, sexual assault, sexual violence. Another prevention effort is to know what those victim support services are. We want to make sure that we know those phone numbers, the community resources that are available to address safety needs, help with reporting these crimes. Just know what services are available out there, where they are located, and making sure that we get those victims linked up to those necessary and appropriate services. And finally, we want to make sure that we as me as a survivor, and those survivors out there, as well as those out there who may be perpetrators, or may or if someone you may recognize some of those risk factors, those signs of perpetration or victimization. You want to make sure that you know what those resources are, but utilize those therapeutic resources. I am a big supporter and encourager of going to therapy, especially as someone who has been a victim and now a survivor of sexual assault or rape. And I encourage those out there who have experienced some form of sexual violence or sexual abuse to definitely seek those therapeutic services so that you are able to process what has happened and move forward as appropriately. So again, talk about it, have those conversations. Sexual assault prevention begins with all of us. Let's shake up society by having those uncomfortable conversations. Let's reduce stigma by raising societal expectations. Let's create a safer environment for all through our voices and our efforts. Let's talk about it. Let's be the change. Remember, if you are in immediate danger, you want to call 911. But here are some additional resources for you to use. The RAIN National Sexual Assault Hotline at 1-800-656-HOPE-4673, and the Sexual Abuse Crisis Text Line. All you have to do is text HOME to 741-741, and you will be linked to a counselor who will be able to help you accordingly. I want to thank you for tuning into this presentation. This is definitely a cause that is near and dear to me, and I absolutely support any preventative efforts out there to prevent sexual assault, rape, any form of sexual violence, as well as destigmatizing rape. Again, y'all, let's have these conversations. Let's have these tough conversations so that we become more comfortable with talking about rape. Again, those rapes are happening, so we need to talk about it so that we can prevent them. Let's be the change, everyone. Again, thank you so much for tuning in. Until next time.